I thought I knew what disappointment felt like after 45 years of marriage. But when Carol sat across from me at our breakfast table last Tuesday morning and said, "Walter, I think it might be better if you didn't come to the cabin this year," I felt something collapse inside my chest like a building giving way. "What do you mean?" I asked, my coffee cup frozen halfway to my mouth. She was using that voice, the one she'd perfected over the past couple of years. Soft, patient, maddeningly reasonable, like she was explaining something complicated to someone who couldn't quite keep up. "The kids and I have been talking," she said. "We all feel like maybe you need some time to yourself this New Year's. You've been so exhausting lately." Exhausting. She said it like it was a medical diagnosis, like I had some condition that made me difficult to be around. "Exhausting how?" I managed to ask. "Walter," she sighed, "you know how. At Thanksgiving, you lectured Kevin for 20 minutes about his investment choices. At Melissa's birthday dinner, you told her boyfriend that his electric car was overpriced junk. The kids are tired of feeling judged every time they see you. Kevin was our son, 43, divorced twice, working at a bank downtown. Melissa was 39, a real estate agent, living with her boyfriend Marcus, who drove a Tesla and talked about cryptocurrency like it was a religion. Good kids, both of them. At least I thought so. I was having conversations," I said. "Kevin asked what I thought about his portfolio. You told him he was throwing money away on meme stocks." "He was. He lost $40,000 last year on something called Dogecoin." Carol closed her eyes like I'd just proved her point. "That's exactly what I mean. You can't just be supportive. Everything has to be your opinion, your judgment, your way of seeing things." I sat there looking at the woman I'd loved since 1978. We met at McGill, married young, built everything together. 3 kids, though our middle one, Daniel, passed away in a car accident 20 years ago. We never fully recovered from that. Nobody does. A house in Westmount, a cabin in the Laurentians, respectable careers. I worked as an aerospace engineer at Bombardier for 37 years. Spent my life making sure planes didn't fall out of the sky. I was good at it. I took pride in it. "So that's the decision," I said. 45 years of marriage, and I'm uninvited from New Year's. "It's not permanent," she said quickly. "Just this year. Give everyone some breathing room. Maybe you could visit your sister in Victoria." My sister Eleanor and I spoke maybe 3 times a year. She had her own life, her own grandchildren, her own problems. "Sure," I said. "That sounds perfect." That night I lay awake while Carol slept beside me, her breathing slow and even. The house was too quiet. I thought about all the New Year's celebrations at the cabin. The tradition we'd started when Kevin was 7, the snow, the fireplace, Carol's tourtière, the countdown to midnight with champagne. Daniel had loved those trips. Even after he was gone, we kept going, kept the tradition alive in his memory. And now I was being cut out of it, removed like a splinter that had finally worked its way too close to the surface. The next morning, Carol left early for her yoga class. There was a note on the kitchen counter. "Didn't want to wake you. I'll be back around noon." I spent most of that day in my workshop in the garage. I'd been spending more time there lately. It was the only space in the house that still felt like mine. Over the years, the rest of the house had gradually transformed into Carol's territory. Her decorations, her furniture arrangements, her rules about where things should go. But the garage was still my domain, my tools, my projects, my way of thinking. I'd been working on something for the past 11 months. Something nobody in the family knew about. They probably wouldn't have cared if they did. To them, I was just old Walter tinkering in the garage, hiding from life, refusing to accept that my useful years were behind me. But this was different. This was more real than anything I'd done since I retired 5 years ago. It started with a conversation at a retirement party last January. My former colleague, James Okonkwo, had left Bombardier about 10 years before me to start his own consulting firm. He specialized in aviation safety systems, working with airlines and maintenance companies across North America. Over drinks at the party, he mentioned something that caught my attention. "The biggest problem in aircraft maintenance today," he said, "is prediction. Everyone's reactive. Something breaks, they fix it. Something wears out, they replace it. But by then, you've already got delays, cancellations, angry passengers, and sometimes worse." I nodded. I knew this intimately. I'd spent decades watching maintenance crews scramble to address problems that could have been prevented with better monitoring. Someone needs to build a system that can predict failures before they happen, James continued. Not just monitor, actually predict. Use all that data we're collecting and turn it into something actionable. AI-driven, real-time, integrated across all systems. He'd said it casually, already moving on to complain about his golf handicap. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Because I knew something James didn't know. Something almost nobody knew. Back in the late 90s, when I was working on the safety systems for the CRJ series, I developed a monitoring framework. Nothing fancy at first, just a way of tracking wear patterns across different aircraft components and correlating them with environmental factors, flight hours, maintenance histories. It had worked remarkably well. The failure prediction rate improved by almost 30% in our test fleet, but it was analog, paper-based, limited by the technology of the time. Bombardier owned the intellectual property, and eventually it was shelved as newer systems came along. But I still had the principles, the methodology, the framework that made it work, and I'd been thinking for years about how to modernize it, bring it into the age of machine learning and big data. After that conversation with James, I started working. Really working. Not just thinking or planning, but building. I taught myself Python at 67 years old, studied machine learning algorithms, read everything I could find about modern aviation data systems, predictive analytics, neural networks. Carol thought I was just wasting time watching YouTube videos about computers. Kevin made jokes about his old man trying to figure out how to use the internet. Melissa asked if I needed help setting up my Facebook account. But I was building something. A platform. An algorithm. A system that could do exactly what James had described, predict aircraft component failures before they happened, using the framework I developed 30 years ago combined with modern AI capabilities. By November, I had a working prototype. It wasn't pretty. The interface looked like something from 1995, but the underlying system worked. I tested it on old maintenance data I'd collected over the years, data I'd kept on backup drives in my garage, and the results were remarkable. The system could predict component failures up to 6 weeks in advance with 87% accuracy. It could identify wear patterns that human inspectors typically missed. It could reduce unscheduled maintenance events by up to 65% based on my simulations. I showed it to James over coffee at a Tim Hortons near his office, just casually. Remember that conversation we had at the retirement party? I've been working on something. He looked at my laptop screen for nearly 10 minutes without saying a word. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, like he was seeing someone he'd never met before. "Walter," he said slowly, "do you have any idea what you've built here?" "A predictive maintenance system." "No," he shook his head. "This is a game changer. This could save airlines hundreds of millions of dollars a year. This could prevent accidents. This could revolutionize how the entire industry approaches maintenance. How long have you been working on this?" "About 11 months, give or take." He let out a breath like he'd been punched. "You built this in 11 months? By yourself? In your garage?" "The core principles are solid. They were always solid. I just needed to translate them into modern technology." James leaned back in his chair. "Walter, I know people. Aviation executives, tech investors, safety regulators. They would kill for something like this. Can I show it to them?" I shrugged. What did I have to lose? My family thought I was obsolete anyway. "Sure," I said. "Why not?" That was 6 weeks ago. James moved quickly. He connected me with a company called Meridian Aviation Technologies, based in Toronto. They specialized in aviation software solutions, fleet management, scheduling systems, safety compliance. They were very interested in my platform. Very interested. We had meetings, video calls, then in-person presentations. They asked technical questions I could answer in my sleep because I'd spent 37 years living this stuff. They asked business questions that James helped me navigate. They asked regulatory questions, and I walked them through exactly how Transport Canada's certification process would work because I'd been through it dozens of times. They wanted to move forward. They wanted to license the technology, bring me on as a technical advisor, and fast-track development for commercial deployment. The numbers they mentioned made me dizzy. 7 figures for the initial licensing deal, with royalties based on deployment scale. Conservative projections put the 5-year value at somewhere between $15 and $25 million. I didn't tell Carol. I didn't tell Kevin or Melissa. What would I say? Hey, remember how you all think I'm exhausting and out of touch? Well, I just built something that might save lives and change an entire industry. They'd probably think I was having delusions, some kind of late-life fantasy where I was still important, so I kept quiet. I worked with the lawyers, reviewed the contracts, prepared for the announcement. Meridian wanted to go public with it on New Year's Day. Big launch, press releases, the whole production. The timing wasn't lost on me. New Year's Eve arrived. Carol had left for the cabin 2 days earlier, taking enough luggage for both of us, even though we both knew I wouldn't be there. Just in case you change your mind, she'd said at the door. I wasn't going to show up uninvited to my own family's New Year's celebration. I had some pride left. Kevin called me that afternoon. Hey, Dad, just wanted to wish you a Happy New Year. Happy New Year, son. You doing okay? Mom said you decided to stay home. Decided. Interesting word choice. I'm fine. Enjoy the cabin. Yeah. There was a long pause. Maybe next year, right? Maybe. After we hung up, I sat in my living room with a glass of sortilege, the maple whiskey Daniel had loved. The house was decorated for the holidays. Carol had insisted on the tree, the lights, all of it, even though I'd be spending New Year's Eve alone. The strange thing was, I wasn't angry. I expected to be furious, bitter, full of resentment. But mostly I felt calm, almost peaceful. For the first time in months, nobody was sighing when I spoke. Nobody was exchanging looks when I offered an opinion. Nobody was treating my presence like a burden they had to endure. Just me, my thoughts, and the quiet tick of the grandfather clock Daniel had helped me restore when he was 16. I spent the evening reviewing the final details of the Meridian agreement. The announcement would go live at midnight. They'd coordinated with the financial news outlets, aviation industry publications, even a segment on BNN Bloomberg scheduled for the morning. At 11:58 p.m., I poured myself another drink. At 11:59, I watched the ball drop on the television. Times Square, full of people celebrating. At exactly 12 a.m., January 1st, my phone buzzed with a notification from the Globe and Mail app. Breaking. Montreal aerospace engineer develops AI system that could revolutionize aviation safety. Meridian Aviation Technologies announces multi-million-dollar acquisition. At 12:03, my phone rang. Kevin. Dad. His voice was strange, high-pitched, almost trembling. What the hell is going on? What do you mean? I just got a Google alert with your name on it. The Globe and Mail is saying you developed some kind of aviation AI system. It says Meridian paid you. He stopped, like he couldn't get the words out. Dad, it says the deal is worth up to $25 million. I sat down heavily on the couch. I'd known the announcement was coming, but seeing it in the news, hearing Kevin's shock, made it suddenly real. Oh, I said. That? Dad, what the hell? Is this real? It's real. You sold something for $25 million? Potentially. The initial licensing fee is $12 million. The rest depends on deployment and performance metrics. Silence on the line. Then, I need to call Mom. He hung up. Within the next 30 minutes, I received 11 phone calls and 23 text messages. Melissa called twice. Carol called 4 times. Kevin called back 3 more times. Old colleagues from Bombardier who'd seen the news. James, laughing and congratulating me. A reporter from CTV wanting a comment. I let most of them go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. The next morning, I woke to 67 text messages, 19 voicemails, and a dozen emails. Most were from family. Some were from journalists. One was from the Dean of Engineering at McGill asking if I'd be interested in giving a guest lecture. Carol came home that afternoon. She walked into the house without knocking. It was her house too, after all, and just stood there in the entryway, still wearing her winter coat, snow melting in her gray hair. Walter, she said, why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? Don't play games with me. She stepped closer, her eyes searching my face. The system, the deal, 11 months of work. Any of it. I looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman I'd loved for 45 years, who'd told me a week ago that I was too exhausting to spend New Year's with. Would you have been interested? I asked quietly. She opened her mouth, closed it. When was the last time anyone in this family asked what I was working on? I continued. When was the last time anyone cared about my thoughts unless it was to tell me they were wrong or outdated or too judgmental? You could have said something, she managed. I said plenty of things. I had opinions and ideas and perspectives based on 37 years of experience, and everyone you included made it very clear that those things weren't welcome anymore, that I was supposed to just sit quietly and not have thoughts that might inconvenience anyone. Carol sat down on the bench by the door. She looked tired, older than I'd seen her look in years. The kids feel terrible, she said. I imagine they do. Kevin hasn't stopped crying. He says he had no idea you were working on anything important. He wouldn't have cared if he did know, I said. 11 months ago, when I told him I was learning to code, he laughed. He asked if I needed help finding the power button on my computer. Melissa suggested I take up golf instead, something more appropriate for someone my age. Carol flinched like I'd struck her. Someone told you what I said at book club. Linda Morrison thought I should know. She thought it was cruel, the way you described me as going through some pathetic phase, playing with computers instead of accepting that I was old and useless. Tears were running down Carol's face now. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears, the kind that come when you realize something terrible about yourself. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? Specifically. For not listening. For not taking you seriously. For she wiped her eyes, for thinking you were just my stubborn old husband who couldn't adapt to how things are now. For treating your retirement like some kind of slow death instead of a chance to do something new. I am old, I said, and stubborn. But I'm not useless. I never was. No, she agreed quietly. You're not. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she asked, what happens now? With the company? With us? Both. I've been thinking about this. Meridian wants me to start consulting in February, helping their development team integrate my framework into their existing systems. They're talking about partnerships with airlines, international expansion, maybe even working with Transport Canada on new safety protocols. I meant with us. With the family. I looked at her for a long moment. I don't know yet. I know I've loved you for 45 years. I know we built a life together, lost a son together, survived things that destroy most marriages. But I don't know if I can go back to being the person everyone wanted me to be. The quiet one. The agreeable one. The one who just nods and smiles and doesn't have thoughts that might make anyone uncomfortable. We never wanted you to be someone else, Carol said. Yes, you did. All of you. You wanted me to be less opinionated, less involved, less present. You wanted me to fade into the background and stop reminding everyone that I still have a mind that works. She didn't argue. She couldn't, because we both knew it was true. Kevin and Melissa showed up together 2 days later, which told me they'd coordinated. They stood in my living room looking like children who'd been called to the principal's office. Dad, Kevin started. We owe you an apology. Several apologies, Melissa added. I waited. Kevin continued. We've been treating you like you didn't matter, like your experience and knowledge were expired, like you were some kind of relic we had to tolerate instead of someone who might actually still have something to contribute. Melissa said, What you built, Dad, I've been reading about it online. The aviation industry journals are saying it could prevent crashes, save lives. One analyst called it the most significant safety innovation in Canadian aerospace in 20 years. I don't care what analysts say, I told them. What do you care about? Kevin asked. I care about being respected, I said. Not because I made money, but because I'm your father and I've lived 68 years on this planet and I might actually know some things worth listening to. I care about being part of a family that values me for who I am, not who they want me to be. I care about having conversations where my opinions aren't automatically dismissed because I'm old or because I don't understand TikTok or because I remember what happened the last time someone told me an investment was a sure thing. Kevin winced. The Dogecoin thing. The Dogecoin thing, I confirmed. And the NFT thing before that. And the cannabis stock thing before that. Melissa stepped forward. Dad, can we start over? Not forget everything, but try to do better? That depends, I said. Are you here because you respect me, or because I'm suddenly worth $12 million? Both, Kevin said immediately. Then, seeing my face, yes, the money was a wake-up call, but that doesn't mean the wake-up isn't real. We were wrong. We were so wrong. And if it took this to make us see it, then I'm ashamed it was necessary, but I'm grateful it happened. I appreciated the honesty. At least it was real. Here's what I need, I said. I need time. Space to figure out what I want from whatever years I have left. I'm not making any promises about family dinners or cabin trips, or pretending everything is fine when it isn't. That's fair, Melissa said quietly. And, I added, if we're going to rebuild this, it has to be genuine. Not just everyone being nice because they're guilty or because they think I'll remember them in my will. Kevin nodded slowly. We deserve that. Yes, I said. You do. The months that followed were strange and difficult and, eventually, something like healing. The story of my platform made national news. I did a few interviews, the Globe and Mail, a segment on CTV's Your Morning, a podcast about Canadian innovation that James insisted would be good for the company. I turned down most requests. I wasn't interested in being famous. I just wanted to work. Meridian set me up with an office at their Toronto headquarters. Nothing fancy, just a workspace where I could meet with their engineering team, review development progress, offer guidance based on my decades of experience. They'd hired 8 engineers to work on expanding the platform, and they wanted me involved in every major decision. It was energizing. For the first time since I'd retired, maybe even since Daniel died, I felt alive. I had purpose beyond just existing, beyond being someone's husband, or father, or former engineer. I was building something that mattered. Carol and I started marriage counseling in February. Her suggestion, which surprised me, we'd sit in Dr. Arsenal's office every Thursday afternoon and try to untangle 45 years of marriage, the good parts, the broken parts, the parts we'd papered over after losing Daniel and never properly addressed. When did you start feeling invisible? Dr. Arsenal asked me during one session. I thought about it. Gradually. Maybe after I retired. The kids were adults with their own lives. Carol had her activities, her friends, her routines. I was still adjusting to not working, and I think everyone just assumed I'd settle into being this quiet, retired person who played golf and watched television and didn't have opinions anymore. And how did that feel? Like dying by inches, I said. Like being erased one conversation at a time. Every time someone sighed at something I said, every time someone changed the subject when I started to share a thought, every time someone suggested I take up a hobby, instead of actually engaging with my ideas, it felt like losing a piece of myself. Carol was crying again. She cried a lot in therapy, which I think was good for her. She'd spent so long being composed, managing everyone's emotions, that she'd forgotten how to feel her own. I didn't know, she said. I thought you were content. I thought you were happy being retired. I thought so too, for a while. But content isn't the same as alive. In April, Kevin came to me with a proposal. He'd been doing research on the aviation industry, learning about the market, understanding where my platform fit in the broader landscape of safety technology. I've been thinking, he said, with my finance background and your technical expertise, we could develop an investment arm, help airlines and maintenance companies fund the implementation of predictive safety systems, make the technology more accessible to smaller operators who couldn't otherwise afford it. My first instinct was to say no, to protect what I'd built, keep it separate from family complications. But then I remembered what I'd told him. Actions matter more than intentions. Show me what you've got, I said. It was good. Really good. He'd done his homework, market analysis, financial projections, regulatory considerations. It wasn't just an idea. It was a viable business plan. We spent the spring developing it together. Working alongside my son, I discovered parts of him I'd forgotten existed. He was sharp, creative, genuinely talented at seeing financial opportunities others missed. And he listened, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak, but actually engaging with what I said. In June, we presented the concept to Meridian. They were intrigued enough to fund a pilot program, and by September, Kevin was leading a small team focused on financing safety upgrades for regional carriers. Melissa took a different approach. Her work in real estate had given her insight into commercial property development, and she saw an opportunity to help airports and aviation facilities integrate predictive maintenance into their infrastructure planning. It's not just planes, she explained during a family dinner, one of the first we'd had since everything happened. It's buildings, runways, control towers, everything. If your system can predict when an aircraft component will fail, why not apply the same principles to structural maintenance? She had a point. We started exploring it together, bringing in her contacts from the development world, my technical knowledge, James's industry connections. By the end of the year, we'd signed contracts with 3 regional airports to pilot the expanded system. Carol took computer classes. She said she wanted to understand what I'd been doing in the garage all those months, not because she suddenly cared about machine learning, but because she wanted to understand me again. She'd never be an engineer, but she learned enough to follow conversations, to ask informed questions, to engage with the work that had transformed our family's trajectory. More importantly, she started asking questions again. Real questions, curious questions, the kind that assume the person you're talking to might know something you don't. New Year's Eve came around again, 1 year after I'd spent the holiday alone in our empty house. This time, we went to the cabin. All of us, Carol, Kevin, Melissa, Marcus with his Tesla, which I still thought was overpriced, but I'd learned to keep that opinion to a gentle observation. Kevin's new girlfriend, Rachel, who worked in healthcare administration. After dinner, Kevin asked me to step outside with him. We stood on the cabin deck, looking out at the snow-covered lake, our breath visible in the frigid air. "Dad," he said, "I need to tell you something." "All right." "Last year, when Mom said you weren't coming to the cabin, I was relieved. I thought it would be easier without you. Less tension, less awkwardness, less of your opinions about everything." "Kevin, let me finish." He turned to look at me. "It was the worst New Year's of my life. Not because you weren't there, but because we'd made you not be there. And the whole time, I kept thinking about Danny. I felt something tighten in my chest. We rarely talked about Daniel. Even after 20 years, it was still too raw. I kept thinking," Kevin continued, "about all the New Year's Eves when Danny was alive. How he used to stay up until midnight with you, working on whatever project you two had going. How he never thought your opinions were too much. How he actually wanted to hear what you thought about things. Son, I realized that I'd become the opposite of Danny. I'd become someone who couldn't wait to dismiss you, couldn't wait to prove I didn't need your input, couldn't wait to show I'd outgrown my father." And he was tearing up now, my 43-year-old son, crying on the deck of a cabin where his brother's memory still lived in every corner. "I wasted so many years being annoyed by you when I should have been grateful you were still here." I pulled him into a hug. He sobbed against my shoulder. 20 years of grief and guilt and missed opportunities pouring out of him. "Danny would have loved this," I said quietly. "The platform, the family working together, all of it. He would have been right there with me in the garage, probably building something even better." "I know," Kevin choked out. "I know he would have." We stood there for a long time, 2 men holding on to each other in the cold, honoring a boy who'd been gone for 2 decades but whose absence still shaped everything we did. "I forgive you," I finally said. "But more than that, I'm proud of you, for recognizing what went wrong, for changing, for being willing to do better." "Are you happy, Dad?" Kevin asked, pulling back to look at me. "After everything that's happened?" I thought about it. The platform, the money, the recognition, the family healing, all of it was good, important. But the real answer was simpler. "I'm not invisible anymore," I said. "That's what makes me happy, being seen." Through the cabin window, I could see Carol laughing at something Melissa said. The Christmas tree lights reflected off the wine glasses. It looked like a scene from a holiday commercial, the perfect family, New Year's celebration. But it wasn't perfect. It was real. Messy and complicated and still healing from wounds that went deep. We'd lost a son, nearly lost a marriage, spent years not really seeing each other. None of that was erased by money or success, or even forgiveness. But we were here, together, trying. And that, I'd learned, was worth more than any licensing deal. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat by the fireplace with my laptop. I was sketching ideas for a new project, an extension of the platform that could apply predictive maintenance principles to critical infrastructure. Bridges, power grids, water systems. The same framework that prevented aircraft failures could potentially prevent the kind of disasters that cost lives and billions of dollars. I hadn't told anyone yet. Maybe I would, eventually. But this time, it wasn't because I felt invisible or unheard. It was because I'd learned something important about myself over the past year. I didn't need external validation to know my work mattered. I didn't need anyone's permission to keep growing, keep learning, keep building. At 68, I was just getting started. My phone buzzed. A text from James. "Happy New Year, Walter. The airline contracts are exceeding projections. You've built something that's actually going to save lives. I'm honored to be part of it." I smiled and set the phone aside. The fire crackled. Snow fell softly against the windows. Somewhere upstairs, my family slept, a family that had almost lost me through neglect, but had found its way back. I was still here, still working, still building, still proving that obsolete was just a word people used when they stopped paying attention. And that, I thought as I closed my laptop and headed up to join Carol, was the real victory. Not the money or the recognition, or even the family reconciliation. The victory was knowing that I'd spent 68 years becoming someone worth listening to, and I'd finally learned to believe it myself. Here's what I've learned, and what I hope anyone listening to this story takes away. Respect shouldn't require proof of profit. Your worth as a person doesn't depend on how much money you can generate or how impressive your accomplishments are. Every human being deserves to be heard, to have their thoughts considered, to be treated as someone whose perspective matters. That should be true whether you're 28 or 68, whether you're building a multi-million-dollar platform or just trying to share something you learned. Age is not obsolescence. The skills we develop over a lifetime don't expire when we retire. They transform. They combine with new knowledge in ways that younger minds sometimes can't imagine, because they don't have the foundation of experience to build on. If someone in your life is older and still trying to contribute, still learning, still growing, listen to them. You might be surprised by what they've been building while you weren't paying attention. Family silence is not peace. When we stop asking questions, stop showing curiosity about each other's lives, stop engaging with each other's thoughts, we create distance that feels comfortable, but is actually corrosive. True family connection requires effort. It requires the willingness to hear opinions you might disagree with, to engage with ideas that might challenge you, to treat the people you love as people, not just familiar figures in the background of your life. And finally, it's never too late to learn something new, to build something meaningful, to repair relationships that have fractured, to prove mostly to yourself that you still have something to offer this world, because you do. No matter how many people have stopped noticing,